Welcome back to my channel for another camera review. This time I'm reviewing a Pentax camera, Pentax K2 camera, and there are several reasons why I've chosen this camera. Previous review of a Cusina CT1 Super, I talked about that it was very easy to get lenses for the Pentax K mount, and this camera is a Pentax and it of course has Pentax K mount as well, so the same thing goes for this. If you haven't seen the previous video on the Cusina, I'll link to it in the description. But what is about this camera that makes it maybe even better than the Cusina? One thing I must say, it's a bit more expensive. I found this with this lens. It's a Pentax 50mm 1.7 lens, a little more open aperture than the one on the Cusina. But I got this camera with this lens for €100. That's pretty cheap. I think you would pay around 150 to €200 these days on eBay. But why this camera? Well, the Cusina was a very simple camera, but it's also a very nice camera, and it has this feature that it can shoot even though there's no battery in it. Well, it has a battery, but it can shoot without a functioning battery, though you have to decide the exposure yourself then. It doesn't do it for you automatically. This one can actually do it automatically. Here on the top you can see there's an automatic setting. And it's an aperture preset, so you select the aperture, and then the camera will select the exposure time for you. That's of course depend on a battery, which there's a small gate, small lock here for the battery. That depends on the battery to be functioning, and it has shutter times from bulb mode and 8 seconds up to 1/1000th of a second. Between 120 and 8 seconds, 120th of a second and 8 seconds, it's all depending on the battery to be there. But if you don't have a functioning battery, you can actually use it at from 120th of a second to 1/1000th of a second, because these are actually manual times, so it can shoot on all these times. Again, you won't have the help of the exposure meter within the viewfinder, as you normally would. This has a small thing on top of this. It has a mirror lock-up button, which is situated here on the side of the camera, and that's nice if you want to do long exposures and would like to put it on a tripod, of course. Locking up the mirror will help you on long exposures by preventing a shake of the camera. So that's a nice feature to have. And then there's one thing more that distinguishes this camera from the Cusina that I looked at previously, and that is this button here, which is a depth of field button. So you actually can close down the aperture to see what is the depth of field in my camera, in my exposure at this time. So if you set it to f1.7, it won't do anything because it's the most open aperture. But if you set it to f8 and look through the viewfinder and press this button, you will see how much depth of field you have in your exposure. So these are very nice things. My camera is almost in pristine condition, as you can see inside here. There's no wear on this camera. It's almost like it's brand new. So that's very nice. Then there's a thing which I could call a fun factor, why I chose exactly this camera. My own company is named K2 Adventure. It's an abbreviation for Key to Adventure, but K2 is also the name of the camera, so it's quite fun to have a camera named almost the same as your company. Another thing that is nice about this camera is that the ISO settings can go from ISO 8 to 6400, and that's quite unusual for camera of this day. This is a camera from well, it was released first time in 1975, so it's a pretty old camera, but very nice and working very well. Yeah, let's look at some images made with this camera. I know the camera itself doesn't make the camera, it's actually more the lenses that make the camera. So let's get on with this. Well, I hope you liked the review of the Pentax K2 camera, the camera named the same as my company. I love shooting with this camera. I've owned it for several years, and it's a bit heavy camera, but I like the feel of something sturdy in my hands. And I have a lot of Pentax K mount lenses, so I have a lot to use on this camera, and I love to shoot with it. It's a nice camera. It can do a lot of stuff, and this thing about that it doesn't need the battery, that you can actually shoot from 1/125th of a second to 1,000th of a second is a nice feature that not so many otherwise electronic cameras have. So if you liked the review, please hit the like button and also subscribe to my channel so you can get more reviews like this or see some of my lens reviews. So thank you very much for this time, and bye for now.